meeting minutes for June 14th, 2021. Motion passed. Motion Franson, second Newell to approve treasurer's report. Motion passed. Supervisor's report, John reported on a FOIA request received and was being worked on, and also flooding areas being worked on by the road commission. Patrols have been added to the cemeteries due to continued theft of flowers and hanging baskets. John heard and received information about a land dispute and alleged Open Meetings Act violation. County Commissioner was not present. Planning Commission Roger reported that Randy Davis had resigned from the Planning Commission effective immediately. Motion Newell, second Franson, to accept the resignation of Randy Davis from the Planning Commission. Motion carried. There is an opening now, and if anyone is interested in serving on the Planning Commission, they should send an email to John Swant, Maple Valley Township @yahoo.com before August 4th, 2021. The board will review for appointment. Zoning Administrator Dave is absent as his wife was rushed to the hospital. Violations will be handled by Dave with a letter, and that gives 30 days for compliance. The sheriff suggests that things will improve in the spring with employee shortages. Assessor Michael reported that the computer changes have been completed and the Board of Review is scheduled for July 22nd. This meeting of the Board of Review is for clerical errors. Complaints will not be heard at this meeting. Community Center discussion about the hall and rental possibilities with COVID restrictions, and it will be used for rental with Terry Jones handling the booking. Her number will be put on the website. Fire Board, Ben reported that there was no report, however, it had been a very busy month. Old business cleanup day was discussed, and it will be put off until the budget workshop in February due to additional costs for lawyer fees. New business. Motion Newell, second Franson, to adopt the FOIA procedure and guideline document describing how to handle freedom of information requests. Motion passed. Motion Franson, second Newell, to approve 5 parcels presented for PA 116 with Brandon R. Carlson Trust with parcels 013-015-006-0133.35 acres. Also 013-015-007-00 and 013-015-008-0040 acres, 013-015-010-29.8 acres, and 103-015-009-1035 acres. 29.8 acres. Total acres on this farm was 185.25 with 135 in cultivation. Motion passed. Reading of the bills. Motion Franson, second Newell, to approve payment of the bills for checks 8751 through 8766 for $84,704.71. Motion passed. Roundtable began at 7:13 until 7:39. Motion wrote Newell, second Franson, to adjourn at 7:39. Motion passed.
All right, any additions or corrections to the minutes? Not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passed.
You want this special?
Yeah, please.
We had a special meeting on July 22nd, 4 p.m. All board was present. The agenda discuss and address the American Rescue Plan grant money available to the township and conflict of interest paperwork. Action taken, information became available on July 14th, 2 days after township meeting, with new updates as to usage of grant monies. When previously the money was not likely to benefit the township, it was clear that we could take advantage of this opportunity. A resolution is necessary from the board to apply for the grant. Resolution Franson, second Miller, to apply for the American Rescue Plan grant along with conflict of interest paperwork. Yes, Swant, Sanders, Miller, Franson, Newell. No, none, absent none, resolution passed. Motion Franson, second Newell, to adjourn at 4:05 p.m.
Alright, any questions on that minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the July, what was it, 12th? 22nd.
Special.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Additions to the agenda.
How about me?
Oops, I'm sorry, did I skip you, June? Sorry, treasurer's report. Trying to get this done and over with.
Okay, we have $530,124.75 in the general fund. That's all I have.
Alright, I'll entertain a motion to approve the treasurer's report as presented.
Motion.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the treasurer's report as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Alright, now additions to the agenda. Under new business, we got a letter from Josh Nolan and, talk about the Bassett case. We got the Veterans Park already in their own business, so that's taken care of. Anybody else have anything? Alright, moving on, supervisor's report. I talked to the sheriff again, cause we're still having issues, I know in Truefant for sure, on stuff being stolen. Now they're taking the actual shepherd's hook, not just the flowers off the shepherd's hooks. So they're gonna try to up their area again, but I know one gentleman that's, talked about putting cameras out there and see if he can catch them on his trail cam, so. I don't understand it, but it's crazy, so.
Must be desperate.
Anybody that drives by at night, just kinda look over the cemeteries when you drive by, please, and see if you can see anybody. Road projects are all complete for the year. The overlay on Masters Road was completed. The first half of Black Road was completed. We'll do the second half next year. Kohler Road was, I wanna say tartan feathered, but they, wedge and seal, that's always the nickname, always call this one, tartan feather. Striping will be done shortly here, as soon as they get caught up again. They are working on the quote for some extra parking spots in Truefant there on A Street and B Street, so that should be coming here maybe by next month. Other than that, I guess everything else I'll talk about as we go on.
How much they went back by those schools? Go do that this year, okay?
No,
They changed it?
yeah, that was, we didn't have the money for that one too, so that'll probably be on next year's agenda. So, County Commissioner, Brandon, well, he's on the paperwork as our County Commissioner, so. Planning Commissioner, Roger,
Yep.
you want to give a report?
Yep, we're still working on the, ordinance for Glenn. We should have probably something closer by next month.
Okay. Zoning Administrator, Dave's not here. I wanna publicly say on behalf of the township, I'm sorry today for his wife Carolyn passing. You know, that's a tough deal when something goes like that, so. The board all went together and got flowers on behalf of the township and sent them up, and Shirley attended the funeral on behalf of us, so. Our best wishes to Dave. Zoning Administrator, that we just did, Assessor. Michael Beach is sick, he called me, said July board review was good, got everything caught up and done. So we're just kinda getting by, and he's just checking, assessing properties right now, so. Anything from the community center? Nothing. Okay.
We haven't connected.
Fire board, Ben.
There were 5 runs made in Maple Valley, 2 were vehicle accidents, there were 3 power lines, down that they assisted with. And we were approved for a government grant, so there will be an 18 kilowatt jet backup generator for the Truefant Fire Station that will be able to be used.
Actually got dropped off today,
Okay.
so, yep. So, yeah, the fire district's insurance company has a risk management division. They come out and give you recommendations on how you should update your policies and your SOPs and SOGs. And part of that is they offer grant money and to help update stuff. So we applied for a grant, the fire department applied for a grant to get a generator installed in the station. So if we ever did have a big event, we'd have power there, it's all natural gas. So we could provide water to people or a bathroom or whatever they need at the time, so. That should hopefully be ready to go by Jubilee time, is what the goal is. All right, old business, replacing persons on the planning commission. Since our last meeting, as I said, Carolyn has passed away, so we actually have 2 open spots. You wanna say something first? Trying to remember. No, okay, I was thinking there was. So I had 8 people that sent us emails that I forwarded all the board members. They were Tim Thornhill, Rachel Porter, Cheryl Hauser, Robin Paulson, Susan Van Eyck, Dennis Delaney, Jeremy Olson, and Michelle Germain. So some of them had put little comments and little messages. I forwarded everything to the board so everybody had a chance to look at them. I guess what are you guys' thoughts? I know ultimately the job is mine to make a recommendation, but I guess I kinda like to hear from you guys if anybody's got any suggestions or thoughts.
Would you mind, sorry, Michelle and, is it Dave?
Dennis?
Dennis, I'm sorry, Dennis.
Shirley says Michelle and Dennis.
I thought, Mr. Delaney and Germain, Mrs. Germain had pretty good responses.
All right, I guess my recommendation to the board then is Dennis Delaney and Michelle Germain. I'd entertain is that a resolution or is that a motion? Motion. I'd entertain a motion to go by my recommendations if that's what the board is interested in doing. Is that a motion?
Yeah, I'll
Your motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded to appoint Dennis Delaney and Michelle Germain to our planning commission. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. All right, next on the agenda is the Veterans Park information. Finally, after, I guess, months, they had a Zoom meeting with an arbitrator, or mediator, and, this is the first I've been involved with it, but, they give us a list of, they would like control of the park, the property owners would, and then they would take care of the park, and in turn, they would bill the township for the work they provided. Nobody on, the arbitrator really didn't think it was a good idea, and neither did our lawyer, which wasn't Kyle. But when it boils down to, the arbitrator came up with a list of some recommendations. Trimming the shrubs, maybe putting some fertilizer down. The back of the one stone had a little bit of mold on it. They thought maybe we could clean that up. Plant some flowers, fill in some divots with some topsoil, add some grass seed as needed. He thought maybe if we tried to do some of that stuff, then maybe things would move forward a little bit and we could come up with an agreeable before this goes to trial. So what I would like to do is get permission from the board to get a couple quotes from some places to look at doing some of this work and report back to the next board meeting with it.
Say it, Miller? Miller did?
Miller made motion to do that.
Yeah. I'll
You second that?
Absolutely.
So it's been motioned and seconded, allow the supervisor to get 2 quotes for, taking care of some of the cleanup at the park in Trufen. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passed. New business, COVID rescue money. As we stated, we had a special meeting. Originally, when they first came out with the COVID money, the list of eligibility stuff was really short. And there was basically, it had to be COVID related, how it affected the township. Well, there wasn't much. We don't have full-time employees, nothing that, so a lot of the townships around here didn't think they were gonna qualify for it. Then all of a sudden, they did a webinar that I participated in with, like, Cato was on there and a bunch of other ones. There was 150 some different people on it. all of a sudden now they've got a whole list of stuff that you can apply for, and then we can fix up our building, we can remodel the offices, we can work on roads. So it opened it up to a whole bunch of good things that we're actually gonna be able to maybe utilize the money for. So we had a special meeting a couple weeks ago, made a motion to approve filling out the paperwork, so we've got it applied, our application's in. We could roughly get, right now they're stating 200,000 based on our numbers once we get into it, but, it's a 2-year deal. We get half the money at the end of this year and half of it next year, and we've got till 2024 to use the money. So, and if we can't come up with a plan that they approve, then we just have to give the money back. So we'll just put it in a special account and set it aside and work on it from there. So that is good to go. So that should hopefully help out some. Next up, we received a letter from lawyer Josh Nolan, who actually happens to be here tonight. He'll be speaking at public comment here in a minute. But Kyle's going to address his letter that he sent to the board.
Yes, so thank you, Supervisor. The Township Board as well as the Planning Commission received a letter from Mr. Josh Nolan related to wind conflicts of interest that pertain in the general scope of a potential wind project. So as a Township Board, one thing that should be known is, one, you don't have a wind ordinance in front of you, and then two, you don't have a project that is applied for. But nonetheless, I think it's a very good reminder of how, one, important conflicts of interest are in this scenario, and then two, is just kind of a refresher of how we address conflicts of interest. I reviewed Mr. Nolan's letter and also have provided assistance to the township related to the letter, but for the benefit of the public, which I have addressed at the Planning Commission meeting, and also for the Township Board, I'd like to address some of these key aspects of conflicts of interest. So the Township Board feels comfortable to either discuss, if they believe they have a potential conflict of interest with me, the supervisor, so we can appropriately handle those conflicts of interest or alleged conflicts of interest under the law. So I agree with probably 95% or more of this letter. One point I do want to make is the letter also addressed vested rights related to a wind project. The general theme of a vested right is whether you can continue to change regulations relating to a land use. And this is what I take the theme of from the context of the letter, and as in the context of Apex potentially applying for a wind project in the township. I agree with the letter that the Apex does not have a vested right in a project. Generally, the simple test is the shovel the dirt test. The vested right generally begins when you put a shovel into the dirt, and the rules that exist then would apply to the project. So for purposes of this, the township is working on a wind ordinance, or the Planning Commission is considering it when working through a potential wind ordinance, and it is essentially those would be the rules that would apply if a wind ordinance were to be adopted, and there would be no superseding of rights by Apex. So I agree with that aspect of the letter pretty much completely. As for the more substantive, I think, issues of the letter, it references a variety of authority related to conflicts of interest. I agree with, as I said, I agree with probably about 95% of it. I do want to make a few things, distinctions that I believe are relevant to the Township Board. So one thing that, and it's hard to make these letters all encompassing, but one thing that also applies to you as a Township Board member is your general fiduciary duties to the township. And what that generally means is you should act in the best interests of the township in all your decision making. Of course, everybody's going to have different policy perspectives. So what someone thinks is the best interest of the township can be different than what someone else thinks is in the best interest of the township. But you should essentially, without going into the specifics of duty of care, duty of loyalty, you should always think about, am I making this in the township's interest, or am I making this solely in my personal interest? If I'm making a decision in my personal interest, you should generally recuse yourself from deliberating on an issue or voting on the issue. So these principles, and I'm summarizing them very broadly, extend all the way from case law in the 1800s, and then they have been more recently applied in a 2004 case that is reported. On that same thread with fiduciary duties, there is also case law that talks about generally what I would say is the difference of legislative and administrative acts and remote interests. So a remote interest may be, let's say you are considering a zoning amendment that impacts single-family dwellings. You live in a single-family dwelling. It may very well have an impact to you that of the zoning amendment. Could be positive, could be negative. And what it has said, and what these cases generally say, is more or less that those would not arise to the basically, it's the kind of common sense approach that those remote interests would not rise to the breach of your fiduciary duties if you have a remote interest. And my opinion here are these are very loose and broad standards, and they are independent to all of you, or not, they apply to all of you. And if you have a thought of whether you think you are potentially not acting in the best interest of the township, or you have a question, I think the supervisor and myself are more than willing to talk to you individually about whether you think that you should recuse yourself based on your fiduciary duties to the township, potential breaching those. Next is the Standards of Conduct Act. The letter from Mr. Nolan addresses both the Planning Commission and the Township Board. I'm going to tailor this discussion more towards the Township Board, as we have discussed this with the Planning Commission at the last meeting. Standards of Conduct Act is an act that applies, and I am going to disagree with Mr. Nolan here, but I don't think he will object to the disagreement. I agree. I believe that this act applies to both the Planning Commission as well as the Township Board. There's a site that references it applies to appointed officials as well. Essentially, with wind projects, you have a couple of topics that come up of prohibited conduct. So, soliciting gifts from someone or an entity that would impact judgment, that is something you should avoid and you should not do, or under law, you cannot do. The second is engaging in business transactions where a public officer or employee may profit from their official position or authority. Third, this is in the wind context, is the execution of contracts, permits to a business entity which the public officer has a financial or personal interest. The last one you'll see a lot with, basically, let's say a township board member were to have a lease with a developer, and the developer had a zoning application in front of them, and the township board member would be subject to voting on that application. But this scenario, this statutory prohibition would prohibit you from doing that unless something called the rule of necessity were to apply, and I will talk about that as well. The interesting thing about the Standards of Conduct Act, and that's short for, I think it's the Standards of Conduct Act of Michigan. It is the Standards of Conduct Act for Michigan public officials. Anyways, I call for the Michigan Standards of Conduct Act to be relevant, basically shorten it. But what I was saying is the Standards of Conduct Act, if you look at published cases in Michigan, I have not been able to identify one that relates to a local official, so it is a relatively untested area of the law, so you should follow its plain language. The second is where you see it apply is generally for state employees, because for state employees there's something called the State Ethics Board that issues advisory opinions applying provisions of this act. And one of the, in a variety of advisory opinions, some of them go back to this remote interest test where they talk about issues of general applicability impacting everyone and whether they would have the potential impact on you yourself of playing into the plain text of these. So I don't want to go into too much detail, assuming that, one, you don't necessarily have an actionable item related to this wind ordinance in front of you, or the wind, or a potential zoning application, so I think it is a little bit premature to discuss in specific details of, you know, this scenario or that scenario, because we really don't have a scenario where we would have to act on it. And the emphasis, I think, from me is, if you have any suspicions of a conflict of interest, you should make those known, and you should contact us to help evaluate that for you. Last thing that was mentioned in the letter were the planning commission's bylaws. So the planning commission has bylaws. They, a variety of the bylaws reflect the Standards of Conduct Act as to what constitutes a conflict of interest, when a planning commission member should recuse themselves from either participating in deliberation related to an issue or so have you. Generally, the township board does not have those. I have seen some conflicts of interest policies that municipalities their legislative bodies have adopted, although that is not required. In terms of the rule of necessity, and I think this is getting a little bit ahead, but this is very important in the context of wind developments, I'll give an example of the planning commission, because this is where it comes up a lot. Many planning commission bylaws throughout the state, you will have what is considered a conflict of interest under the planning commission bylaws. If you live next to a property that is subject of a request, so a wind project generally involves large tracts of land, you may have a conflict of interest under the bylaws if you have a relative, regardless of your personal opinion on the project, that has a lease. So you may get people with different policy views, even than some of these conflicting people, making them have per se conflicts of interest. So what the rule of necessity is, and it's been incorporated in case law, published case law, is it is generally an absurd result if, let's say you have a request, the planning commission has a duty to review a site plan, let's say for example, and conflicts of interest would prohibit the planning commission from taking any action on the site plan. What this doctrine says is basically those with conflicts of interest should disclose those interests on the record, and they would be allowed to deliberate and vote as long as they are acting in the best interest of the township and following their fiduciary duties. Let's say you invoke the rule of necessity and you are still going to not act in the best interest of the township, then you should not allow yourself to basically vote on or deliberate on the issue. The rule of necessity will only applies if a quorum of the public body is lost for voting, because it's trying to avoid the absurd result where you have a duty that's in front of a legislative body or appointed body like the planning commission. They can't fulfill that duty and nothing would happen. That's what it's trying to avoid. It's been applied to the Michigan Public Service Commission before, and various other and other entities in case law. So those are that's the brief analysis that I wanted to give you to conflicts of interest. The short thing I basically want to say is, one, these are extremely important. So do not hesitate to contact for help if you need help navigating them, because I know they are private conversations, and a lot of the times you would like to have private conversations related to a potential conflict of interest, not in open public to begin with. If you do have a conflict of interest, and an actionable conflict of interest, you should recuse yourself from deliberating or voting on matters. And the last thing is just to make sure that you're aware of these if there is a project that is applied for, if that occurs, or if you have an ordinance in front of you where you think you might have a fiduciary. You basically have too strong of a personal interest to act in the best interest of the township. Those would be hot buttons to watch for. That is all I have, unless the board has any questions for me.
All right, thank you. The next one is the Bassett case with Foggerson Drive and the township's part in that.
Yes, so for the public, and this is relatively uninteresting, but for the public, there was a case that involves vacating part of a plat. It's my understanding it's for various access rights to parcels. the Plat Act or the Land Division Act requires that basically a plaintiff in any of those cases has to notice a variety of different people as per se, I call them defendants, but they're kind of more respondents. So these would include everybody who lives 300 feet away from the land at issue, as well as a variety of governmental entities, including the county, the drain commissioner, essentially everybody who approves a plat in Michigan when that approves the plat. So you're modifying a plat, so you generally want to notify, or the law requires you to notify everybody related to that. The township has been involved and has had a law firm involved in the case. It's been my understanding that, you know, the township's involvement or interest is relatively, you know, it doesn't have, and this is me, and the board can correct me if I'm wrong, potentially did not have much of an interest in the case despite being involved with counsel who has filed various pleadings and other things related to the case. I have had a discussion with the supervisor to essentially allow the township to take a passive role, and how the township could take a passive role in the case. It doesn't remove you from it because it's a Plat Act case, so you'll be a party. But so a lot of the townships that we represent, they will get cases like this, or even other governmental entities like drain commissioners, they will get named in suits like this. And sometimes they literally just default because they have no interest. So you get paper, and the property owners who have interest they find the resolution that they want to have, and you know, whatever happens. And when there's remote interest, sometimes you don't want to take, one, you don't want to expend funds, and then two, you don't really want to take sides. So knowing this now, I have suggested motion. So there's the suggested way to remove yourself from essentially taking an active role in the case. That would be, my recommendation would be to substitute me to counsel to allow me to file basically a stipulated dismissal of a counterclaim related to the defendants in the case that the township has shared legal counsel with, and to take actions deemed appropriate by the supervisor to limit the township's involvement and fee exposure in the case. That's I think that's a typical route that many townships take in these types of cases. Sometimes they want to take the times where these cases end up starting to matter is, let's say someone wants to vacate a part of the plat that relates to access to a variety of people in a township, and then it has matters of public concern, but it's a sliding scale. So if the township would like to, or if the board would like to move forward with that, I do have a proposed motion language to do that. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer questions about the case.